Yes. Good afternoon and good afternoon. This show is being pre-recorded, but I am Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. And as many of you know, Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. We jumped in the deep water at the onset of COVID. My background is in media, but really when we saw people walking around Harlem talking about I'm Black, I can't get it, it was like, okay, we got to get on the horn and make sure that people know what's happening and people are informed. And they did not see themselves on the mainstream media, which is why they thought Black people couldn't get it. Media is powerful. So it was important. The job that we're doing is important. We are the voice and the drumbeat of Harlem and the Harlems of the world. And today we are very, very, very excited. The unveiling of the gate of the Exonerated Five is happening this Monday, the 19th in Central Park, near 110th between 5th and Malcolm X Boulevard. So we're going to be talking about that today. And we have, I just also want to just, send up prayers and energy as so many of our greats and, all kinds of people from babies to grown people to gunshot, like as my son was shot last year, I revisit him. So I just want to send prayers up and clear the way for the ancestors who we know are watching over us always. But I have with us one of our Harlem greats, heroes, iconic figures, and that is in the person of Abiodun, of the original Last Poets, and Abiodun Oyawole. If you would just say Alafia, as you say, to our audience and let them know who you are and whose you are.
Well, Alafia, which is the Yoruba greeting for peace. Actually, the entire expression is Shea Alafia Ni, but we always shorten things and just say Alafia, which means peace. And I actually adopted the name Abiodun, was given the name Abiodun Oyawole when I was 15 years old. And I was given the name by Baba Surgeman Adefumi, who later became known as Kabiesi, because he was the king of the Yoruba village that is in South Carolina. And there are a lot of people who are not aware of the Yoruba village, but there is a Yoruba village, an African village in South Carolina, about Sheldon, South Carolina, which is about 50 miles outside of Savannah, Georgia. And I'm a part of one of the original investors of that village. And the brother who actually started it was my godfather. He was the one that gave me my name. And I got into, Harlem was always a place of fascination for me. I was, as a child, every Sunday, coming from South Jamaica, my parents would come into Harlem to go to church. We went to Southern Baptist Church, which was actually on 108th Street between Central Park West and Manhattan Avenue. I loved Sundays because I would get a chance to come to Harlem, where I always seemed to witness the most arrogant Black people on the planet. Everybody in Harlem looked like they owned the world. No one looked downtrodden. Everybody looked up tempo. And then we would go from church to my aunt's house on 142nd, and then it was just Lenox. Of course, it's 142nd and Malcolm now. And when they started talking about me, all the little things I had done during the week, my Aunt Baby, her name was Aunt Baby. We called her Aunt Baby. Her name was Irene. But Aunt Baby said, "Go outside, Charles." My American name was Charles. And I didn't mind. I was supposed to not listen to them talking about me. But when she sent me outside, that was a show. But I got a chance to watch the girls jump double dutch and do hopscotch. And I was getting a real nice taste of Harlem culture. And in Queens and South Jamaica, where I was raised, I didn't see that in front of my house. That wasn't, I was raised on 154th Street, which was actually at that time an Italian neighborhood. The only Black family that lived in my block besides us was West Indians across the street. And the Jamaicans across the street didn't have nothing to do with us, which was really kind of a mind blower because my mother was very friendly. I remember her sending Christmas cards to everybody in the neighborhood because that was my mother's spirit. And I'll never forget the Jamaicans sent the Christmas card back to us. Like, we don't even want the Christmas card. It was very, very hurtful. But I did grow up in South Jamaica. And the one thing I do remember is the Italian feasts, which were very special because those feasts were great. And I loved the Zapoli's, what they had. I didn't like the music and all that stuff, but they had games and they had some food that was good. But I always wanted to be a part of Harlem. Harlem seemed to be electric. It had excitement. So, and when they killed Dr. King, I was very upset. In 1968, I became outraged. I was like a kid. I was young, but I was totally insulted by the idea that this man of peace would be shot down. And I really wanted to do something vicious, like get a gun and start shooting white people just at will all over the place. And I had met David Nelson, who was he had a poverty program in Spanish Harlem. It was called Double Block Recreational Educational Program between 118th Street, 119th Street, between 3rd and Lexington. And I worked for him. That was like one of my earlier jobs. I was a teenager. And he talked to me about, he was writing poetry in Spanish. I was trying to mess around with writing something in English and French, because French was the language I learned in school. And we both were poets. And it was interesting because I didn't even know I was a poet. I was just messing with words because I always had a fascination for words. And so we were sharing ideas, poetic ideas. And he said to me, he says, I want to start a group, a collective of poets to like speak about the issues that we're faced with. And maybe Black people realize that, because poets usually come alone, but if they saw a collective, they saw a group, maybe we'll give a good example as to how much we got to unify. But we need to have unity. We don't have that in our community. And I heard what he said. It sounded good. It sounded romantic.
Okay.
I let it go. But when they killed Dr. King, I called David. I said, David, the idea for that group, you need to get it going, because if not, I'm going to become a serial killer. I'm going to do something terrible. He said, man, don't do nothing. He put our name, my name, and his name, and the name of a brother he met here at Columbia University named Garland Kane. Kane had a poetry reading, and he did a reading. So Kane and David had met each other. I didn't know Kane, but he invited Kane to his house. David lived around the corner from Mount Morris Park, which is now, of course, Marcus Garvey Park.
Yes.
And we met in David's apartment and decided on how we were going to go on stage as a group. I had seen the week before a demonstration at Howard University, because there was a president there named Nesbitt, I remember his name was. And the students didn't particularly care for him because they had an effigy of him hanging from a tree. And they were marching around the tree singing beat, beat, bang, bang, Ungawa, Black Power. And then they went into a whole other chant. Are you ready, niggas? You got to be ready. Are you ready? And I never heard that word on the TV ever. So I was blown away with the demonstration and how bold these students were. So when it came time for the last person to go on stage the very first time, which was commemorating Malcolm X's birthday and in Mount Morris Park, and I'm trying to figure out how we can go on stage together make it clear that we're a group, that we're not individuals. I thought maybe we could sing together. Kane couldn't sing. David couldn't hold notes. We handed it to him. I was the only one that could really sing. But I knew we could all chant. You have to have a voice that sings, chant. So I said, let's go on stage chanting, Are You Ready, Niggas? And I thought it made sense because Kane had a poem entitled Niggas Are Untogether People. David had a poem entitled Are You Ready, Black People? And I had just written this poem that I had got basically from the people called What's Your Thing, Brother? Because at the time, the hit song that was out was It's Your Thing, Do What You Want to Do.
Right, yes.
So everybody was running around talking about their thing, and their thing either was a member of the Black Panthers, or they were in the Nation of Islam, or everybody's thing has something related to the movement, because we were about the movement at that time. So I just piggybacked off of what I heard in the streets. And that's basically where most of my poetry has come from. And so we did that, and that kind of affirmed the fact that we were a group. We went on stage singing Are You Ready, Niggas? By the time we got to the center of the stage, the entire park was singing Are You Ready, Niggas? And we performed, and we got a gig immediately. The very next Friday, we were performing at Loeb Center down at New York University. So the group, we didn't even have a name for the group. David was the one that came up with the name, and he gleaned it from a poem written by Kelpesi Kokosili. No one could say Kelpesi's first name, so they called him Little Willie. Little Willie Kokosili had a poem, and it's in a beautiful anthology called Black Fire. And the poem is called Towards a Walk in the Sun. And that poem kind of outlines the conditions that Africans had to go through in their own homeland during that apartheid regime. And you can tell the anger in the poet. But at the end of the poem, he changes the font to everything is bold, capital letters. Says this, when you hear is the birth of memory. When the moment hatches in time's womb, there will be no art talk. The only poem you will hear will be the spear point, pivoted into the punctured marrow of the villain and the timeless native sun, dancing like crazy to retrieve rhythms of desire fading into memory. And David added, therefore, we are the last poets of the world. So now we got a creed, we got a name, and we're off and running. So the last poets were born. Then Kane decided, he said, listen, if we have a place in Harlem, that would even endear us even more to the people that we're trying to reach. So we found a place on 125th Street between 5th and Madison, and we call that place the East Wing. And that was our spot. It was an L-shaped loft, and we produced concerts there with Amiri Baraka, who was Leroy Jones, Spirit House Movers and Players, Sun Ra, Pharaoh Science, Leon Thomas, a whole bunch of folks. I mean, it was just a fabulous cultural
Powerful, powerful, powerful.
And we gave birth, we helped Barbara Antia launch her National Black Theater because she worked out of our space for $75 a month. We rented her space. I don't know what you can get for $75 a month today.
Maybe you can get dinner. But for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. And we have our iconic Harlem Queens person, in the person of Abiodun of the Last Poets. And he's just sharing who he is and whose he is and how the Last Poets came into fruition. Right. And we are going, this is Harlem Network News, and we're going to continue with Abiodun sharing his story and telling us about his connection to the Exonerated Five. And as many of you know, and if you don't know, now you heard it first on Harlem Network News, there will be the unveiling of the Gate of the Exonerated on Monday, the 19th. And that's a significant day because I believe it marks 20 years of their exoneration. And it's a story. I don't want everyone to assume that everyone knows everything. But, you know, back in the late 80s, there was something that happened in Central Park. A white woman was raped and 100 young Black boys were incarcerated, and then they were gone through and so on and so forth. And they decided that it was these five that did it. And they were known as, quote, the Central Park Five. And they all were just stamped guilty. And as we were having in our pre-discussion, Donald Trump had took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the death penalty. And even to this day, I don't know that he has acknowledged, you know, their exoneration. So it's a heavy story. There's a documentary put out by Ken Burns that was on Channel 13. There's also the series, it's a little, about 3 parts, When You See Us. And that was with Ava DuVernay. And of course, Dr. Yusef Salaam, one of the Exonerated Five, has a book out, Better Not Bitter. So really important that we know our history in the Sankofa mode. So we know what happened, we know where we are, and we know where we're going. So back to you, Abiodun, as you continue on your story and your connection.
I just want to give people a little insight as to the origin of the Last Poets. And we were always trying to uplift the people and trying to expose each other to the weaknesses that we had to deal with, because we didn't wage war against the system as much as we wage war against ourselves to try to extricate or eradicate that negative energy that we may have had for one another. We still suffer from that slave syndrome of not liking ourselves as much as we should. And consequently, it causes a lot of problems in our community. So that was our effort. And I'm very proud of the work we've done. Our very first album came out in 1970, but it wasn't with the original members. The original group members changed, and the first group were with people that I had to replace members with. David, ironically, was the first to go, and Felipe took his spot. But that was a cool thing because we do have a lot of Latin brothers and sisters that are aware of their origin. And Felipe is one of those Latinos
Yes.
who knows that he comes from Africa. He doesn't come
Felipe
from
Luciano, that's right.
Felipe Luciano. So that was, matter of fact, that group I consider one of the most powerful groups because Felipe and I could sing. He could sing very well. So we harmonized very well behind. And Kane loved it because Kane loves to be up front. And Kane was a super performer. He had a lot of charisma. And he was a great, great poet. I learned a great deal from Kane. I just wish Kane loved himself as much as we loved him. But the fact is that he was a super talent. And I always give him credit for giving the last poets their aesthetic because he knew what that was all about. Then he decided to go down to the village and do some Blue Gorilla stuff and Holy Ghost Fallout Shelter stuff. He had his own ideas what he wanted to do. And Felipe said I told him he should go to Spanish Harlem and organize his people. And he went and he started a group called the Young Lords. So I was literally left as the last poet, but I wasn't gonna go like that because that wasn't what the group was intended to do. So I went down to the Sikh program. They had a dormitory at the Alamac Hotel on 72nd and Broadway, and I went there to perform. And I had gotten this brother who had come from Akron, Ohio, to be in the group. Like he was just like we were recruiting people, and we were not recruiting anybody, but he had seen us perform at Antioch College, and he became totally smitten, and he wanted to be like a part of that. So he came all the way from Ohio to New York, and I set him up. I put him in got him a place to stay. I took him to Sylvia's at that time. Sylvia's restaurant was just one little greasy spoon, but I took him there to eat.
Right, all right.
And then I got him a place to sleep at the Alamac Hotel. Gloria Doolin was the sister in charge. I said, he's not going to go to school, but he needs a place to lay his head. And so he had a place to sleep. And then I had a performance down there. But as I said, the group had dissipated. It was just myself and my conga player and Elijah. But the students were there because I was basically their age and they loved me. I had a wonderful relationship. So they all came out. They were sitting on tables and places packed.
Nice.
And I said, as you see, I'm by myself. But they didn't seem to mind. And I had poems that they wanted to hear as well. And I said, but we do have a guy that's living among you that wants to be in the group, and I'm going to make that decision as if he can be in the group or not. And so Umar, I got him in the group. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but he put him in
Umar Ben Hassan.
Umar Ben Hassan, who's known for the famous poem he's known for his Niggas of Scared Revolution. And there was another brother that Kane did not like because he rhymed everything. And I always give him the credit for being the biggest influence in hip hop. His name was Jalal Mansour Nuruddin. And he passed away a couple of years ago from brain cancer, but his rhymes was outrageous.
What was his name?
And Jalal Mansour Nuruddin. On the first album, his name is Alafia Pudin. But what he did, he made Shahada. He became a Muslim, and his name changed. And one of the most famous poems that he did that everybody knew was called On the Subway. On the subway, the man digging on me. He was hungry in a mass of confusion as who I was. He was trying to see what me knowing me, being black, proud, determined to be free, could plainly see my enemy. Yes, I know him. I saved him, made him a pound of black gold. Off the sweat of my labor he stole, but he will never understand a new black man, let alone see us every day. Riding the subway, 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, IND, 6th and IND, IRT. He still has dug me. He's on the brink about to sink. I asked you, brothers and sisters, can I save him? Can he be saved? No. Next stop, Hunter and Fish Street. Well, see, Hunter and Fish Street is different now because a lot of those folks get off with us at Hunter and Fish Street. But then Hunter and Fish Street was strictly a black neighborhood. And so it was scary, to see any white people on the train after 59th Street. But he's gone on, but he did have a great influence. And that particular group, myself, Umar, and Jalal, put up the very first album of The Last Poets, and it sold 1 million copies by word of mouth. There was no social media. So we kind of made an impression. And that was a beautiful moment in time. But that all led me into being a part of trying to do something, be in service of my people, who I've always felt were beautiful and special from the time I was a child, coming to Harlem on Sunday, going to church, just seeing Black folks and experiencing the love of Black people, knowing the energy, knowing the vibrance, knowing the genius of us was something that I became accustomed of as a child. And I wanted more of that. And being in Harlem has given me that kind of energy, has given me that kind of that kind of kinship that has really stuck in my soul. So I knew that if I ever moved from Queens, I would live in Harlem. So I've been here in Harlem now for at least 45 years.
Okay.
And I started teaching at Columbia University. And of course, if you teach at the school, schools have a lot of property. I got my apartment through Columbia. And then then they were trying to kick me out. I got a fellowship, which allowed me to work on a doctorate. And so I got a Repson fellowship here at Columbia. And now I'll be here for as long as I can pay the rent. And it's been
I love it.
And during that time, I've done a lot of consulting work, and my consulting work has taken me to schools, a lot of different schools, a lot of different places, and especially I've done some consulting work in some of the penitentiaries. And one of my places I did consulting work was Spofford, and I was working at Spofford when the Central Park 5 thing came down.
Are you serious? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and one of the young men, I think it was Raymond Santana, he was in Spofford for a moment, and he was telling me, I had a chance to talk to him, and he said, "We didn't rape anybody, Brother Dune." And I said, "You know what? I'm looking in your eyes, and I believe you. I'm telling you, I believe you're honestly telling me the truth." I said, "But the problem is, I'm not going to be on that jury. I'm not going to be the one to determine your fate. You got to make the jury believe that you were innocent." I said, "I believe you, man." He says, "No, we didn't have nothing to do with that woman." I said, "Well," I said, "they already got you crucified, brother." And it really broke my heart. And I never dreamed that some years later, many years later, I would be on stage with Yusuf Salam at the Schomburg having a conversation about the situation. But I do know one thing, of all the conversations I've ever had with anyone, including me and Felipe doing a conversation at the Apollo 2 years back, this conversation with Yusuf was special because he's a very classy brother.
Oh yes.
He's got the manners, he's got the look, he's a handsome brother, and he knows how to present himself. He speaks truth to power. He's not afraid, and he does it in a way that anybody can understand what he's saying. He's not rough around the edges. He's very smooth, and he's clear. So we had a wonderful conversation. That day was a very special day, and I feel very honored to be able to be a part of them being celebrated on Monday.
Yes, and this is once again Harlem Network News. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is our pre-show for the Gate of the Exonerated, inspired by the Exonerated Five. And the gate is going to be unveiled on this Monday, excuse me, the 19th. 10:30 is when we will be having our drumming and the pouring of libations. We will be having Baba Tunde and Baba Don Eaton as our drummer in resident, and Reverend Rhonda McLean, Akanke McLean Noor, will be pouring libations and doing the prayers to the ancestors. We are starting with prayer as we clean the way. And Abiodun is our Poet Laureate and has written a wonderful poem for the Exonerated Five. But this is why I love doing Harlem Network News, because I always learn something. And it's so serendipitous in our community. I had the honor of meeting Abiodun when I was 17 years old at Lincoln University. And the last poets had come there to play. And then there was a little meeting up in Gil Scott Heron's room at that time. And we called him Spider-Man. And, you know, Lincoln was primarily a male school. It was 4-1. But me and my two good friends who are also creative and artists, we marched ourselves right up there in that room and sat with the rest of the brothers and met the last poets. And, you know, Gil was cool with us because he was like an older brother. So he always wanted us to be in the mix and to learn. And, you know, he was a gentleman. Absolutely. Gil was a gentleman. So, yeah. But it's just amazing how connected we are. The fact that you would have been at Spofford, you know, teaching and meeting, you know, Raymond Santana. And I know that Dr., who is now Dr. Yusef Salam, and Kevin Richardson, they both received college degrees up at Spofford. They got associate degrees there. So we have to look at what the connections are in our community and the significance of this day coming, that in this park where this horrific act happened, where these young men went to prison for years, like and from 7 to 15 years, they
Right.
were incarcerated. And even when they came out and had done their time, they were still like considered sex offenders, and they had to go to meetings and put in live places. And they went through such horror. And what brings up something for me, Doom, is when you talk about what happens internally in our community, because not only were they like getting flagged from like white people like Donald Trump taking out a full-page ad, but Black people were beating them up, spitting on their family, calling them a rapist, so it was really a traumatic thing. And it also made other Black people who lived around that park not let their children go in the park. So it contributed to the segregation which is in this park. And we know that Seneca Village was originally Central Park, where Black people lived and houses got bulldozed and they got paid penance. So this is a significant day because there has not been a gate name in 160 years.
No, it has a rippling effect. It's so funny you mentioned Seneca Village because about 6 months ago, I just participated in a movie about Seneca Village.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a sister named Jan, who had done something called Black Techno out of Detroit. She was given a commission to do a movie about Seneca Village and paid by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And she called me and told me she wanted me to be involved. And then I said, well, how do you want me to be involved? She says, well, we want you to be like the poet of the village. And she said, but I need you to write a poem. I said, that's a little bit more than acting a part. You want me to write a poem about Seneca Village? So I said, well, I know about it, but I could use more information. So she sent me about 8 or 9 pages worth of stuff with pictures of what the place looked like. And I realized it was just like Black Wall Street in many ways. It was another place that we were doing very well as a village, sharing the wealth amongst ourselves. But the problem was it was located in the middle of Manhattan, which was a metropolis, a serious economic metropolis for white folks, and they couldn't have a bunch of Black folks sitting in the middle of that. So they decided to get rid of them. And so I did I was trying to figure out how could I write a poem about Seneca Village. And I said, well, what was there when the Black folks were there and what remained there after they were kicked out? And I said, the trees. So I did a whole poem from the point of view where the trees tell the story about what happened to these people. And the poem came out nice. And but then I think about the connections, like we were just saying. And now we're dealing with the Exonerated Five, an incident that took place in Central Park that really never did take place, but Central Park is still the place where this activity jumps off. So that's, in many ways, Central Park is almost like the heart of the city in so many ways, because it represents the end of a certain kind of white metropolis and the beginning of a Black attitude. Because when you take Central Park downtown from 59th Street and you come out at 110th Street, it's a different thing altogether. I mean, you're actually going from one world to another world. And so it's very deep how that happens. But yeah, I think it's honorable for them to at least have some kind of tribute to these brothers, because they destroyed their lives in many ways. And the time that they lost, they'll never have that back. They can't get that back.
Yes, they cannot. Cannot. And it's a huge thing, and it's been a huge journey for us even to get this date of the exonerated. And we want to give a salute to Miss Sharon Salam, who is the mother of Dr. Yusef Salam. She's been a champion in making this happen. She was a champion. She never gave up for them to get out, be exonerated, and as did the other family. So we want to, she's been instrumental in this. Community Board 10, there's a sister, Chanel Washington, who lived around there, and she was a person who said, we've got to do this. The borough president, Gail Brewer, was involved in this when, now she's a council person. but she was for this. And then the all borough board, that's all the community boards in the whole city had to vote on it. And then this Monday, we had another iconic win for Harlem. The design commission, there was someone who had an opposition to this gate. And you can't build anything in New York City. You can't even put in a faucet unless the design commission signs off on it.
Mhm.
So I'm a part of the Exonerated Five task force, and I had the honor of going to the design commission with Ms. Sharon Salam and other members of the Central Park Conservancy, which really controls Central Park and has all the money and makes all the things happen. We testified, other people, the Innocence Project and Reverend Joanne Santana, the sister of Raymond Santana, she testified. And in fact, there will be a prayer walk tomorrow morning. And she's been doing this prayer walk for 5 years. It starts at 2522 Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard at 146. That's near the house of Raymond Santana. And we will be walking past where all of the exonerateds live, straight down to Central Park at 110, where the gate is going to be named. So we're on a power walk for healing. And she has been doing this because you can understand that with what happened to them, it happened to the families.
Right.
It happened to the family. She said, I was 17 and I'm the one, and young, and I had a baby, and I'm the one who got the call. Okay.
Right.
So,
And this reverberates not only just to the family, but to the whole race, because it puts us in a space where, we're thinking we're giving birth to these kids that are wild and just are just going up on people, raping them, doing what they want, like wild animals. I mean, it just doesn't, it's a very bad mark for us as a people. I mean, if that's the case, we know we've got some Looney Tunes, we know we've got some folks that are outside the realm of all kinds of reality. But for them to have crucified these 5 brothers the way they did, and for them to methodically go through the whole process of incarcerating them for being guilty, and they were not, it's a sham and a shame. But the problem is also, like I mentioned in the poem, this has been done before. The Scottsboro boys went through the same exact thing.
yes.
I mean,
And that's the significance. This is like nothing new under the sun. And even today, and how many years ago was that? And they were young people. They were teenagers, they were children, and the oldest person was Corey Wise. He was 16. And so he had to go to the prison of the adults. But this is still happening. So that is why it's very significant. There's going to be the gate, there's a plaque, there's a QR code where you can go to the website. I think the website is the Gate of the Exonerated, and you can get more information. And also, let me not forget, on Monday evening at 6:30 at the Schomburg, there's going to be a discussion with the Exonerated Five, and I believe one of the heads of the library, and maybe the community board, Cecily Harris chair. There's going to be a discussion because there's educational components that are going to happen, for different age groups coming out of this. So this is just the beginning.
Well,
And yes, go right ahead.
I'm hoping it is, because the one thing that it's kind of a setup is that we don't have safe places for our young people to go, and they're all roaming in the streets. People will make up stories. They'll create a story. They'll create a scenario. But we're at this point now. This is 2022. There should be places with computers and other kinds of activities going on, in-house places where our young people in every community, Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, all over, can go and spend time. And they would fill those places up. I know they would if they have something there attractive to their mindset. And they have we're so much into gadgets and this whole technological age. The kids shouldn't be roaming the street looking for fun. They should be able to find it in a safe environment and doing something even more creative than what many of them are doing, because we do have quite a few kids that are just wayward. They just run the street. And it's an easy way to get yourself involved with something that's going to be negative. If we have a space where they can come and even get some instruction or be introduced to something that could probably entertain their imagination, we would save ourselves a lot of trouble. I'm so appalled at the fact that even today we still have this unnecessary violence where some brothers are running around with guns and they're shooting and don't know how to shoot and will kill innocent children on the street. I mean, that bothers me, the fact that we're still doing that. And how do they get these guns? And what's on there, what's happening here? What are we not doing that's causing this element to exist? So there should be some places where they can go and sit, just like when folks go to, I saw a center on Midtown where folks go in there, they got computers and it looks like a very nice spot. And somebody has some coffee or hot chocolate available for folks. And you can spend all day in there. You have to pay nothing. I mean, we need to have some places where our kids can go.
Yeah, very critical. Very critical.
And develop their skills on some level, or discover the skills that they didn't even know they had. But spaces where they can exercise some energy that they do have, but exercise that energy in a positive way.
Yes, well said, and very important. As we're here and we're winding down, I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News, and we're here with our poet, the last poet, Abiodun Oyawole, and he is the Poet Laureate for the event on Monday, the 19th, the naming of the Gate of the Exonerated. And he is also was hosting a panel with the Exonerated Five about a year ago at the Schomburg, and there's another event at the Schomburg. But what was your takeaway? What was the connection? Also, in case you haven't passed by, on the big billboard outside the Schomburg is your picture, and you're kind of reaching out to Dr. Yusef Salaam, a powerful picture.
Well, so, I haven't seen the picture, but I know my initial reaction when I saw the brother, I was enthralled because he has an inviting vibe. You could feel him. He could feel his honesty. You could feel his sincerity. There's nothing fake about him. And then we connected right away because he had been hearing my latest CD, which was called Gratitude. And the first track on there is Rain. And he said, my daughter's name is Rain.
Oh,
okay. I said, what? So that was also very nice and serendipitous, so to speak. And so we talked about that. I talked about that album because that particular album is my pride and joy because it's a family project. And
yeah, I love that project. I love it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful project. But the talk was very nice. I forget who the moderator was, but the conversation we had was just very harmonious. And I appreciate how he addressed the audience and how we talked about all the things that need to be spoken about how justice there's have a blind eye when it comes to our situation as opposed to others. And I think I mentioned during that time, Cut 'em Loose Bruce, who was a good friend of mine, and he was a judge at quite a few of the other justices.
Yes, Judge Bruce Wright, right.
Yeah, Judge Bruce Wright, because his name, we call him Cut 'em Loose Bruce, because he would give the same so-called punishment that if a white boy had done something in Long Island and came up before the justice, sometimes the judge would say, all right, don't do that, and smack him on the wrist and say, now go home and be a good boy. So when Judge Bruce Wright was doing that, they hated it because there's a whole movement to keep us making the prison industrial complex a reality. And that's really another form of slavery, because when you get into prison, you are in fact a slave. Your rights are gone. Whatever assignment that they give you to do, you have to do, and you're not going to get paid. And it's really slavery revisited. So they've designed the prisons to incarcerate us primarily because they're still in that same slave concept. They brought us here to serve them. If we're not serving America, white America, then that means that we should be locked up for trying to serve ourselves on some level or another. If you are an artist like Wesley Snipes or Mos Def and you're making money, well, okay, we can't get you for raping somebody in Central Park, but we can get you for taxes. So
yes, absolutely. Lauryn Hill, many.
Lauryn Hill. I mean, I just did a gig with Mos Def recently, who is now
nice.
Bay, and he's living in Barcelona because of taxes.
Mm,
Uh, he's no
mm.
longer living in America. So there's
Okay.
so there's a bunch of ways in which they are going out of what the system is still. The system was not designed to work for us. It was
No.
designed to keep us in a very subservient situation. It was designed to keep us in a slave situation, basically. And we have to recognize there are two things that they always do to our young men: either dehumanize them, like what they did. That was what they were trying to do with the Central Park Five. When Trump takes out a whole New York Times page to call these brothers beasts and to recommend the death penalty for what they did, like they just did something viciously horrible.
Mm,
And I mean, so that's dehumanization. He's not even looking at them as young men. I mean, there are white boys who really do rape women all the time, and they get, you shouldn't do that, and don't do that again, and they get some kind of exoneration if they get any time whatsoever. But in this case, this was so vicious, and the attack against those brothers was outrageous. But that's a part of the plan. Either do that or feminize us. If they can feminize us, that's another way of controlling us. That's
right.
why that's why none of our all your basically your known black comedians have had to have a female counterpart.
Mm,
Bill Wilson had to have Geraldine.
mm.
Jamie Foxx had to have Wanda. Martin had
Right.
to have Shanae. And that's
Okay.
why I love our boy Dave Chappelle. He says, "I'm never wearing a dress. I'm not gonna put on a dress."
I hear that. I
You
hear
know,
that.
but the dehumanization and the feminization of black men, those ways, because there's a power that black men have that's still very scary to white people. And the thing about it, we're not vicious, we're not evil, we're not. If we were, this country would have been knee deep in blood a long time. We are
Mm,
we are over forgiving. Matter of fact, sometimes we are too forgiving, and many people have forgiven. I remember when his brother got shot by this police officer. He comes into his house, thinking it's her apartment, and she shoots
yes.
his brother dead, and she was exonerated. And the brother of the brother who was killed gives this woman a hug. I'm saying, what the hell is going on?
Right. I hear you.
And
Yes.
then in Charleston, South Carolina, a guy goes into the church, acts like he's going to worship with the people, turns around and starts killing folks, killed 9 people. And they talk about the sermon next week was we have to forgive our enemies.
Mm,
Oh my God, we're too forgiving. We're too loving, but we seem to be loving and giving only to those who hate us. Because when it comes to each other, we don't show the same love. We don't show the forgiveness that we should, but we seem to forgive others for hurting us. This case is key because at least somebody is trying to make folks realize this was wrong, and we need to make it clear to the world that 5 men and their families connected have been totally just devastated by this wrongful act. And the least we can do is pay tribute to them while they're still here and honor them by having a gate or something in their honor to at least offer some kind of apology for what we've done.
okay. Well, that's very well said. And that is what is happening. And it has been, as I said, quite a journey to
Yes.
get to the gate. But it's a victory. It's a small victory for us. But we want, since it's a gate, it'll be up for eternity. You
Right.
know, it's carved in stone, and the website is there, the placard is there, so that when folks come, they can understand what this means. They can go to the website and understand more about it. And we hope in the near future to be able to erect a statue, you know, or, you know, a monument to the exonerated and, you know, inspired by the Exonerated Five, because, you know, a statue and all those kinds of things are very visual and very meaningful.
Right.
And there are really no Black people in the statues in the park. There's one for the suffragette, and that's probably about it. And there
You know
is an
what?
exhibit on the Seneca Village in the park. But I would love to know about the film, because a lot of people really don't understand what happened, you know, with Central Park. Suddenly they wanted to model the middle of, you know, like you said, the middle of Manhattan after some parks that they had in Europe. And it was really set up for the rich to go around and walk their children in the pram. And even now, it has the connotation that it's not for Black people. You know what I'm saying? When you go and you walk through the park, you see just a lot of white people walking and having a picnic. And, some of that has to do with a lot of Black people are working and trying to figure out how to survive. And they're not going to have the picnic, but it's our park too.
Is there any mention of Seneca Village ever being there?
Excuse me?
Is there any mention of Seneca Village ever being there?
Yes, in the park, there's actually an exhibit, and it needs enhancement. It was put as a not a permanent exhibit, but they're trying to move it towards that. And it's somewhere in the 80s off of Central Park West, and it's a Seneca Village exhibit. But what you're saying about Seneca Village, that the person who is doing the film has pictures and all of that, I'm sure that the Central Park Conservancy would love to know more about that. So it's important for us to know our history. Harlem Network News. Go ahead, David.
Well, Metropolitan Museum of Art funded this. She's a Nigerian filmmaker. Her name is Jan, and they just recently did it. It probably could be seen on YouTube or something because it's up and running, and it's about Seneca Village. And I knew a little bit about it, but I got a whole lot more information because I had to research the information she sent me to write the poem. And it was a thriving little community. I mean, and it was totally wiped out because, I mean, just like they did with like I said, Black Wall Street, which was of course a real serious community in terms of capital. We had, I heard that was probably one of the richest places in America, which always blows my mind because I say, God, those folks had only been out of slavery for like just 40 years or so. I mean, 50 years. And we're going to go being a slave to being in charge of our lives.
Right. Yeah. I think it's very interesting that you bring up this point because all of these things are tied together. And on the website, the Gate of the Exonerated, which we, Harlem Network News was on the task force as well.
Right.
And the website has a lot of this information because what happened is right after slavery and Reconstruction, a lot of things were happening for Black people. Towns were building up.
Right.
They were voting, doing all this stuff. And when they saw that the Black people were thriving, they started changing the laws. And that's when Jim Crow came. And that is, they also, since they didn't have them to work as slaves, the prison situation came about too. Because I think there's a film, Melvin McCrae did a film that was up at the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Museum, and it was about post-slavery. So they had to like start jailing people like for looking at a white woman or stepping off the curb because they had to build a railroad, and then they did the sharecropping thing. And so slavery really didn't end. And if we look at what's happening with incarceration, we know that it didn't end because it's the prison industrial complex. And what's in the prison, it is us. And who's making Victoria's Secrets for 50 cents a day? It's us. So we got to look at what that history is and what that means. And when you said Cut It Loose Bruce are our hosts and MCs for the Monday event is the Honorable Keith Wright, son of Cut It Loose Bruce, and our Senator Cordell Clear. Was very active with everything going in. So, it's going to be a powerful program, and Harlem Network News will be live streaming. So if you can't get out there, you'll be able to see it. And I believe the Innocence Project, but I'm going to put the link. And Abiodun, if you would, before we just close out and you give a closing statement, could you just let us know how folks can get in touch with you and get your books and new projects and what's happening?
Well, my email is a way to be in touch, and it's poetabiodun@yahoo.com. And my name is, so it would be Poet, P-O-E-T, then my name, my first name, Abiodun, which is A-B-I-O-D-U-N @yahoo.com. That's the best, that's probably the easiest way. I do have a phone, but it's a landline, and that number is 646-861-2646. but the most reliable way of being in touch with me probably would be through my email.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. And where can they find out about all the books and the albums and
All you gotta
all
do is
that?
email me, and I do have a web. I mean, my niece has a website, but I don't know what it is.
Okay.
So if
Let
they
me
get a
look,
hold,
find
my kids are really running my social media stuff. I
All
mean,
right.
that's out of my generation. But the fact is that they've been doing an excellent job.
Okay.
And
I love that.
I'm real proud of my niece. My niece basically is running stuff. She is excellent because I have a Facebook thing, a
I love
Facebook page. And when I write something new, I just wrote a piece yesterday that I'm sure she's going to post called "The Tie Must Die" because I'm sick and tired of. I mean, I hate ties, and I also know that a tie is a phallic symbol, and nobody seems to recognize it. It's just they consider it like just the
Say that
marketing.
again. Just break that down.
A tie that men wear. You know, people
Oh, okay.
a well-dressed man if you have a tie and a suit on.
Mhm.
And of course, you know, brothers can outdo anybody when it comes to dressing. You can if burlap sacks were in style, we could make a burlap sack look like a mink coat because we have that ability to make anything look great because of who we are as a people and what we
Absolutely.
radiate. But the fact is that I've never liked a tie, and as a kid, and I didn't know the symbolism of ties. But everything that we have, everything in our path is a symbol of some sort, and a
Mhm.
tie is a phallic symbol. And
Wow.
and the thing about it, that it really got an exposure during the Trump administration because if anybody paid any attention, Trump's ties always went way below his belt. So he was, so he was always trying to tell you that he had the biggest penis in America. And
Uh-oh.
and then the other piece that really, because being a poet, you know, you got to be sensitive and be aware of all these things happening around you. So when women started trying to vie for positions as CEOs of big corporations, the fashion designers went and designed a blazer for women with a tie, and you can see this in the Fifth Avenue stores. So they're putting a tie around their necks. So they sit at the table saying, "Yeah, I got a penis too," you know,
Uh-oh.
because a penis represents a certain power. But I love my girls in the hood because if you're in the hood, whether it's Chicago, LA, it doesn't matter what hood, if you're in a black neighborhood, the sisters just bypass all that and they just tell you personally, suck my penis. And they would say it viciously. And I even questioned it when I was doing some workshops at Rikers. I told this guy, I said, why you say that? You ain't got no penis. What do you say that for? Why you say, you know, you say it like you walking around with a big Jimmy. She said, oh, it's just a figure of speech. And she's now using the term that I use when I'm teaching creative writing. I say, and they really do mean it as a figure of speech because the penis represents power. And so they're just simply saying, I got power. And don't try to deny the power that I have. And I love it. I just wish all those sisters could see the movie The Woman King because that is
Yes.
a great
Amazing. Yes.
exhibition of sisters' power.
Yes.
And
I love it.
but they're not trying to be men, they're women. And women dedicated working together can move mountains.
Mhm.
We all must know, every man must recognize that it's the woman who provides the strength that we actually glorify. Men we're here to do a job, but we would not be here if it were not for women. And that's one reason why our chromosomes is 23X and 23Y. So half of us have, but we don't mock. I have a problem with this in America. They want to mock a woman by becoming a woman, and I'm supposed to accept this guy who was born a man, but now he's going to be a woman. And it's a perversion that needs to stop. Recognize the woman in you, but for the reasons of the attributes that women have, compassion, the maternal thing, all that stuff is very necessary. Men don't have to be brutal and hard. We can show some compassion and love and learn how to cook and clean like women do. There are a lot of things that women do that men can also do. But it's very important that women get the respect. Women have never, all across the globe, I don't care, Asian, African, white, women always kick to the curb, and it's a problem. And as long as that problem exists, the world is never going to be a happy place. When we come to grips with that reality, the strength of women, which is what I got from saying woman king, because they were fighting for their king, and he was a man. I think he had about 10 wives or something.
Yes, yes, yes.
But they weren't, and they weren't doing no funny under the cover, this is my wife type of madness. No, we are warriors. And they learn how to fight. And they were kicking butt.
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful story. I mean, even the way that Viola Davis had a child through a situation by dealing with the slave, and she had to kill the father because they were trying to maintain the slave situation. And the holy woman said, no, slavery got to stop. We got, and the story is just so riveting.
And it's a true story, and that's why it's so powerful. I had the honor to go to Dahomey, which is now Benin, and actually go to the palace at Abomey, where they had on display the breastplates of the women. So I have seen it all. It's a powerful thing. So much of our history that we don't know.
And you see, and think about it, we've never heard of any rebellion against the slave trade. Never. The rest like they came over there and they just scooped up a bunch of black folks and put them on the boat, and everybody went happily on the boat. And nobody in the neighborhood or in the villages were displeased. Whereas those Dahomean women said, no, that's out of order. And when she killed the Oba, which was a black cat who had sided with the slave merchants, that was important because we know we've had those white folks couldn't do that without the help of Africans.
Absolutely.
And that's a reality that you don't see too much of, and that movie pointed it out. I know the Academy Award are not going to respect it because it's a little too much for them, and it exposes them, and they don't like to be exposed. But I hope that everyone can see it, because it is a very important piece to see.
And the educational component, so that people understand this trueness of this story, so that we can learn. But this has been an amazing discussion with you because there are so many wheels and so many spokes, and you're always so knowledgeable. And as you said, being a poet, the sensitivity and being in tune with things. So we're going to close out. This is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom. And we would like everyone to come out, if they can, to see the unveiling of the Gate of the Exonerated on Monday, the 19th. 10:30 is when the drumming and libation start. And the drummer is, of course, part of the Last Poets, and if need be, and you need a little drum, little ba with your poem, we'll make sure that happens. And I'm sure you all will discuss. And if you can't come out, certainly we are going to be live streaming it. We are making history here in Harlem. And, as James Baldwin said, so goes Harlem, so goes the world. So Abiodun, if you would just give us a closing statement that connects to this Gate of the Exonerated and what you want people to know and the meaning of this.
Well, and I have this pledge that I always do, and I think it would be befitting. I want to feel good about me and blame no one for my misery. I want to do what I can do to make all my dreams come true. Remember my past, the good and bad, how I made it art, even when it was sad. I want to share whatever my gift. And when you're feeling low, I'll give you a lift. I want to live without fear and know that I'm blessed for being here.
All right. And you can't get better than that. So we know that there's hope, and there's those of us that are on the path, and we're soldiers. And certainly when you spoke about Woman King, certainly Ms. Sharon Salam, the mother of Dr. Yusef Salam, is a woman king, as are the other warriors, Reverend Joanne Santana. She'll have the prayer walk tomorrow. So just much love, folks. And let's stay strong. Let's stay on the path. Terri Wisdom, Harlem Network News. Go to our website, our Instagram. Please donate a $5 or a $10. You can go to Zelle, Harlem Network News at gmail.com, or Cash App, the $ Harlem Network News, or just go straight to the website. But this is for us and by us. So we need you. And if you have a skill, or, you can write, or you know of a story, reach out. So Harlem Network News. And we're honored to always have you, Abiodun. And I always feel better after talking to you. My spirit is.
Thank you.
So blessings.
All right, blessings. Peace.